Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Strong Style. I am one of your hosts here, John Rocha, the Outlaw, doing it here from Los Angeles. Joined, as always, with the man with multiple wrestling figures behind him there. Looking awesome. Got the ring lights set up. He is ready to record this episode. That's Orlando's own Aaron Turner. How are you, man?
Good, man. I got a fresh cut. I got a fresh shave. I'm looking good. I'm feeling good. Let's get into it.
You are. You're looking good. I appreciate that. Yeah, I got blinds up in here in the office now, so light's not bleeding in. Trying to do the best I can to light this place so that people can see what the hell I look like and can hear what the hell we're talking about. I'm using a new mic that's hooked up here, so I'm taking your word for it that I sound good. So hopefully the fans will feel the same way once that they listen or watch this particular episode. And for those of you who are new, thank you for clicking on this episode. Really appreciate you joining us on Strong Style. What we do, Aaron and I, we're old friends in terms of professional wrestling and other things, and we love talking about the sweet science. And we review one match from the classic history of professional wrestling, break it down, talk about its history, talk about its legacy, talk about the match itself if it's worth talking about, and get into any of the tangential stuff that goes on with professional wrestling or any of the backstage stuff that may have come up to set up this match. And today we're talking about Nick Bockwinkle versus Mr. Perfect himself, Curt Hennig. This is a match from 1987, Superclash II. It's for the AWA World Heavyweight Championship. And if you're asking yourself, who the hell is Nick Bockwinkle? Or if you're even asking yourself, who the hell is Curt Hennig? First of all, it's time for you to get educated. Second of all, you need to get some history in your brain, son, because there is so much to talk about here with two historically awesome and technically proficient wrestlers. Aaron, what can you tell us, man?
Sure, we could have talked easily about Mr. Perfect. We could have talked about the Mr. Perfect side of it. You could have gone to his classic matches with Texas Tornado, with Bret Hart, and why he didn't get a shot at Hulk Hogan. We could have talked about that, how he was maybe supposed to win a Royal Rumble but didn't. Talk about that another time. Yeah. But Nick Bockwinkle is a guy that I don't think a lot of people, especially in the modern era, really think about, because he's very similar to a Ric Flair kind of in the way that he talks. Very, very slow, very meticulous. Where Flair had that frenetic energy, Nick Bockwinkle was like the rich guy that you wanted to punch in the face. Man, he was so good on the mic. He would use big words, and I know that sounds kind of trivial right now, but for back in the day, it made it sound like he was talking down to you. So he always had this air of, I'm better than you, and you know it. Kind of like a modern day MJF, if you will. Oh, yeah. But a little bit different. And Nick Bockwinkle's slow delivery in the way that he did it inspired wrestlers like Chris Jericho and Flair to change up their promo style, which is really cool to see. And Nick Bockwinkle, one of the greatest technical wrestlers you'll ever see, very much inspired, or very much almost introduced us to Hulkamania, because Hulkamania ran wild in the AWA before it ran wild in WWE, and Nick Bockwinkle had a lot to do with that. So keep your eye on Nick. If you haven't watched this match, it's available on YouTube. You just punch in Curt Hennig versus Nick Bockwinkle Superclash II, and you can watch it for free. I don't think it's on the network. I think it's a DVD exclusive extra match. You said you had a hard time finding it on the network.
I typed in Nick Bockwinkle on the WWE Network and nothing came up. So I don't know if maybe there's another way to search for it, or maybe I did I spelled it correctly. So I don't know if maybe they've got it under separate things or don't have it as a separate section. Yeah. I don't know, but nothing came up when I typed in Nick Bockwinkle, which was a bit of a surprise. Maybe I should have gone the Curt Hennig route, but then there'd probably be like 35 other matches before I'd find that one, if it even was on the network. So.
But that is the thing. If you want to check it out, it's free on YouTube. You're not going to get in trouble for looking at it. If you want to check out something a little bit deeper about these two and about the AWA in general, there's an excellent documentary on the WWE Network called The Spectacular Legacy of the AWA. Yeah. It is excellent. It's one of my favorite ones. That and the Triumph and Tragedy of World Class is two of the best WWE documentaries you'll ever see. So definitely check that out if you haven't. Excellent doc.
You know what's great about those docs, Aaron, is they really tell you the truth about what happened in those federations, and you see it from both sides, right? You get to make your own decision by the end of the doc of what you think happened, who you think's to blame, or what you think was the reason everything that went down that was huge in those federations did. When the WWE does documentaries about themselves, they're not as honest as they are about
revisionist history.
Yeah, there's a lot of revisionist history, a lot of trying to explain reasons for why, or retconning certain things for why certain things happen. So that's the only frustrating part when you get to the WWE docs. But the docs they do about the other federations are fantastic. And it's a great way, if you're a student of professional wrestling, look, it's not all just what's in front of you or what's happening right now. You got to go in the past to see why things are happening now in the future or in the present. There's a lot of things from the past that still work today, still echo into the future, or still echo into the present of what you're seeing from professional wrestlers in the world today, and also from fans who love technically proficient wrestlers. They're big fans of wrestlers like that. Yes, there's always room for the Hulk Hogans and the John Cenas, the 8-move wonders. There's always room for those guys, but there's also always room for these great technical wrestlers because they show you why the art form works at a subconscious level. You know that you're watching. This is history, and this is what some people forget sometimes about professional wrestling. This goes back to Greece days, like ancient Greece. And you got to understand that's where the wrestling was. And when you look at 70s and 60s wrestling, 50s wrestling, behind the scenes, these guys sometimes legitimately didn't like each other and didn't mind showing you that in the ring, working stiff, taking shots, what have you. There's plenty of stories about guys having that having that experience in the ring with other dudes who legitimately didn't like them or didn't like that they were supposed to drop a belt or drop the match. And so watching Bockwinkel and Henning is a great example of that in terms of the fact that these two guys look like they legitimately don't like each other throughout the whole match, but they're landing some really hard, clean shots on each other. Very stiff, exactly. Great point you bring up, Aaron. Very stiff on each other, and it is fun to watch. Back, and maybe people get mad at me for saying this, but watch when men used to fight men, when it was dirty and gritty and hard in that ring. The guys nowadays, it's a lot more of a, choreographed dance. So it's fun to watch in that way. But back then, you just never knew what was going to happen. If you watch this match, there's so many short clotheslines that look devastating. Curt Hennig goes out the ring and almost smashes his head into a steel railing. It is brutal, and I enjoy this. And one last thing I'll say, I know this is a little bit of a rant, but Bockwinkel, let me add a little bit of thing. Bockwinkel was trained by Lou Thez and his dad. He had his first professional wrestling match when he was 16, and you talk about the stuff about his promos. Aaron, you're absolutely right. He used to carry around apparently a dictionary or a book, and whenever you heard a big word, he would write it down and have the definition. And he said those words started creeping into his promos without him knowing it. So he was trying to educate himself at the same time as he was trying to educate himself as a wrestler. So you got to give a lot of props to Nick Bockwinkle for that.
Yeah, so if you ever heard the phrase in wrestling when someone say, "Oh, I've got the intestinal fortitude," Bockwinkel said it first. He was the first guy to say it. He would talk about how cunning he was and how much smarter he was than everybody, and that's what I really liked about him. Going back and seeing those old AWA matches, they used to play them on ESPN Classic. You could go back and watch like the old AWA shows, and that kind of got me into it because you get to see a very young Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty. Scott Hall, before he was, Reza Ramon Chico, he was on there doing his thing as Big Scott Hall, and of course Curt Hennig, one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. So
yeah, and Tito Santana, you could see Tito as well.
Arriba.
A young Tito was always great to see. Yeah,
of course. But let's talk about where Curt Hennig came from. He came from Robbinsdale, Minnesota, from the famed Robbinsdale High School in Minnesota, where he was childhood friends with future Hall of Famer Rick Rude. And we could have a whole episode about how awesome Rick Rude is, but we'll save that for another time. But he was also in the Robbinsdale area training with guys like the Berserker John Nord, Smash of Demolition, Road Warrior Hawk, Nikita Koloff, and Tom Zink. That's a pretty good group of guys there. There were a couple other ones that he trained with that I didn't recognize, so I didn't put him in the list. But it's very cool. And, of course, Hennig did join Vern Gagne's American Wrestling Association in 1980, a wrestling federation which also had his father, Larry the Axe Hennig, was also a part of. And they actually got to team up and became tag team champions at one point, which, looking back on it now, is Larry the Axe, we lost him actually pretty recently. Yeah. But Kurt's been gone for a while. I bet that was quite a thrill for Larry the Axe to team up with his son and win the tag team titles. I bet that was a really cool moment for them.
Well, there's a connection between these two guys in that because Bockwinkel also got his debut, or not debut, but he also wrestled with his father, who was a professional wrestler, as a tag team as well. I don't think they won titles, but they did wrestle as a tag team. And Bockwinkel was managed by Bobby the Brain Heenan, who Curt Hennig was also managed by later on down the road. So there's a lot of connections between these two guys in more ways than one that obviously led to some great matches, some great classic matches. We were talking before we started, Aaron, there's an hour-long match between these guys. What is it, a 60-minute match or an Iron Man match? Is that what it is?
It's not an Iron Man match. It's just a 60-minute time limit, and it goes to a draw. It's just a bloody, brutal match. Both dudes are bleeding everywhere, and it just ends up in a draw. But hell of a match. If you get a chance, if you got an hour, check it out. It is worth your time. But Nick Bockwinkle did retain due to the draw. So Curt Hennig was not yet to be AWA World Heavyweight Champion.
Yeah, we should tell him, Aaron, why we're doing Curt Hennig this week. Is it his birthday or is it the anniversary of his passing? Why are we doing Curt Hennig this week?
It is near the unfortunate anniversary of his passing. He passed away on February 10th, 2003. I know that's a little bit further. It's about, a couple weeks away from, in the past. But, Curt Hennig's one of my favorites. He's one of your favorites. So I figured let's talk about that. And while we got the chance, because we've been talking so much WWE, which is fine and great, let's take a step back and talk about some AWA classic action, because it's stuff that we like. You and I, we bond a lot. We're not the same age, but we like the same kind of wrestling. And that's cool. And that's a lot of what's going on in this match, because I think you were texting me as you were watching, like, ooh, this is really technically sound. I like what they're doing here, because I knew you'd like it. So that's why I'm glad that we came across this one here.
Agreed. And I'm glad I don't think I'd seen this match till I watched it for our episode, because there's so much in that past history that I probably wait, let me correct that. Maybe I did watch that match, because as a kid there was so much on TBS or on all these number of networks, and probably an ESPN Classic. I'm sure I would leave it on and just watch matches and do whatever without knowing the history of them, because most of the time with an ESPN Classic they would show the matches. They wouldn't necessarily give you that much background about it before you watched it. So I'm sure I've watched this match at some point, but certainly it's been a long time since I did. So it felt like I was watching it all over again anew for this episode, and I enjoyed it like crazy. And we should probably get into the history of these two. Or do you want to talk more about Curt Hennig, or do you want to get into the history of these two guys before we get into the match?
Well, let's talk a little bit about Curt Hennig. Of course, everybody knows him as Mr. Perfect. We'll say that a million times, but he was a good, sound amateur wrestler, good athlete. The whole Mr. Perfect vignettes that you would see later on were basically true. Like, he could do these things. He could play darts and throw a bullseye. He could hit home runs. He could shoot 3-pointers. He could do all these things. Very athletically sound guy was Curt Hennig, and he wasn't. I'm going to try to make this make sense. He wasn't a small guy, and I don't mean like he wasn't. He was like about 6'3", but he was a barrel-chested dude. Yeah. Like, it doesn't really come across when he's going up against a guy like Hogan or Nick Bockwinkle, who are much bigger than him. But he is a barrel-chested, strong, athletic, Minnesota-made guy. Yeah. And he wasn't one of these guys that were on the juice. He was just doing his thing, and he looked like an athletic powerhouse. And I think that his strength and his athleticism are kind of overlooked on occasion. More so his strength. His athleticism is well documented. Mm-hmm. But just a guy that could go out there and go all night long with somebody. Yeah. And that's where he gained respect. He won the tag team titles with Big Scott Hall. As I mentioned earlier, Scott Hall before he was, Razor Ramon and all that good stuff. Mm-hmm. And, of course, he won titles with Larry the Axe, his father. He would have rivalries with Jerry Lawler and all these other guys before departing for WWE. But I just can't say enough good things about Curt Hennig. I knew when I was a kid, I knew that, like, oh, this guy's different. This guy's really cool. I like him. I like throwing the towel and catching it, spitting the gum into the crowd and slapping it, throwing the pencil in your face. I loved all that stuff. And to see him go back before he was perfect, pretty cool. Yeah,
I mean, sure. And the hair is shorter. He's a little heavier than he was in the WWE or in WCW, but not heavy in a bad way. He's just, like you said, he's a barrel-chested dude. So this is a young barrel-chested guy who maybe doesn't have the knowledge about how to shear down a little bit in terms of weightlifting and how to cut certain things in terms of eating and food to highlight himself, which we saw later on down the road. So he is like, it's like you see old things of Ric Flair. Ric Flair, it may be hard for a lot of people to believe, Ric Flair was a large dude when he first started wrestling. He is nowhere near. He doesn't look anything like he looks nowadays, or like you see him in his classic matches. A trimmer Ric Flair, no less powerful, just trimmer. And so the thing here with Curt Hennig, and of course Bockwinkel's in his 40s, I think, when he's doing this match. So he is in excellent shape for a man in his 40s. Let me tell you I know something about that. He's in fantastic shape, and I wish I looked as good as he does in this match. And
great hair.
Great hair, both of these guys. And you're right, the way you're going to stand out, right, and stick around for people is if you do something distinct. There was something about Curt Hennig, right, in the era of Hulk Hogan's and Rowdy Piper's and Iron Sheik's and Andre the Giant's. How does someone, and Randy Savage's, how does someone stand out, or Jake the Snake even, how does someone stand out just being a damn good wrestler? And there was something about Curt Hennig's like smug face and the way he carried that towel and, like you said, the gum. His tights weren't even that, interesting to look at. They were two-tone tights that he would take the strip down of, and those were like wrestlers' tights that he wore to kind of convey the fact that this is a real wrestler you're getting in the ring with. Yes, he's a professional wrestler, but he's certainly schooled in wrestling, so he can have a technical fight with you, or he can have a big spot fight with you. It doesn't matter. He's able to bring it no matter what it is. And I love that about Curt. Honestly, he was one of these guys that never gets enough credit and died way too young to get love from the fans or the Hall of Fame stuff to the level that he could have done it. Right? Bockwinkel, we lost recently, only a few years ago as well, but he lived to an older age, obviously, and had some stuff with the WWE as well. But yeah, we should have had more time with Henning, man. It would have been fun to see him. And of course, unfortunately, his son didn't do quite as strongly as Curt did for his dad, Larry the Axe Hennig, but no less. You could see that there was potential for that guy, but didn't quite 100% get over. But still, Curt has an incredible legacy for a lot of fans.
I don't know how much of Curtis Axel is who we're talking about. I don't know how much of that is Curtis Axel's fault. From what I hear, Joe is quite a good wrestler. I don't know why they saddled him with the perfect gimmick right away. I wish they would have just let him be Joe Hennig and not Michael McGillicuddy, and then Curtis Axel. It just sounds terrible. It's just as bad as Rocky Maivia. It's right. You either gonna break out or you're gonna sink. And unfortunately for Curtis Axel, he's kind of sinking right now.
Yeah, it's a shame. But what do you think? Like, what is your favorite memory of Curt Hennig of Mr. Perfect? Like, what is the one? I mean, obviously we're going to talk about this match, but what is the one thing that sticks out for you that you think that like is one of your favorite memories of Curt?
The thing I'll remember most is him and Bret Hart in the lead up to their match at SummerSlam, when Curt Hennig is with the coach, his like little manager that he had for a little bit.
That's right.
He's holding his Intercontinental Championship, and Curt Hennig was so proud to be Intercontinental Champion, probably the greatest Intercontinental Champion of all time. Sorry, Honky Tonk Man, but he's just proud to be holding it. He's holding it with such prestige. It's always shiny. It always looks good, and I'll never forget when that match is excellent. It's probably if you're going to show someone a wrestling match for the first time, show them Bret Hart versus Mr. Perfect, because it's excellent. And, he's getting thrown all around the ring and bumping. And then later on, I was watching this Bret Hart documentary, and he was talking about that match, and he was saying that Mr. Perfect had a serious lower back injury throughout that entire match. And he said, I don't care. We're going to do it. I'm not going to sit this one out. I'm going to do this for you. He wanted to put Bret Hart over because he knew Bret was the future. That's the kind of guy that he is. And in a more funnier story, he was a very known joker. Big time ribber was Mr. Perfect. And if you remember, I don't know if you recall this, but Lex Luger for a brief period of time was the narcissist, and he had tassels. He had tassels on his tights. And Mr. Perfect and he wrestled at WrestleMania 9. Well, in the lead up to that, they would wrestle on the house show loop and stuff. And Mr. Perfect would go up to, would be in a hold and would grab one tassel out of Lex Luger's tights and just rip it off. Just one. And then after a while, there would be a little bald spot. And it drove Lex Luger insane. And this is another thing he did to Lex Luger. Like, Lex was known as, he's a bit of a narcissist. It fit.
In real life.
And one day in the locker room, Lex came in, and Mr. Perfect looked at him and said, Lex, did you skip working out today? It's cool, man. Like, did you skip it, though? And Lex is like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? I worked out like twice already today. He's like, okay, man, cool. If you skipped it, that's fine. I mean, I'm just saying. And he's just that kind of guy. Yeah. Just lighthearted, kept everybody good, like happy on the road when, road life is hard, and to have somebody that'll make it a little bit easier is always a good thing. So I always remember Mr. Perfect for, his ability in the ring, his toughness, and his ability to make it light and have a lighthearted time with people.
It was always nice to cheer for him when he was a face. Obviously, yes. I loved cheering against him as a heel because he was such a great heel, and both these guys, him and Bockwinkel, really perfected that smug approach to being a heel, getting under people's skin by not being affected by anything. They were so good at it. But whenever he was a face, I always loved cheering for Curt, because he was actually a good face without being like a full-on face, doing the John Cena act. He was full-on face. And I loved, my favorite moment for him is actually not a moment in the ring. It was when he slapped Bobby Heenan at the desk when he left Bobby Heenan.
Yeah.
You're not going to tell me what to do. When he smacked Heenan, I was just like shocked. I didn't know that people did that. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, is that scripted? Because that slap looked like it really, really hurt. And, people forget Bobby's an old school guy as well. He took his bumps in the ring as a professional wrestler before he became a manager. So, Bobby's like, just smack me and let's see what happens. And then he tried to apologize to him and said like, oh, no, I'm sorry, Curt. No, I didn't mean it. Like, all of that is one of my favorite moments ever for Curt. And when he became a face after that, I just was such a fan of his overall. But you can't argue what you just brought up, man. His fights with Bret Hart were fantastic. His fights whenever he got into great extended programs with any wrestler back in the 80s and early 90s, it was fun. And I loved it when he went NWO. He was one of those guys that didn't need the letters, but once you put the letters on him, he was even more of a badass. And it was great to see him and Rick Rude reunited in the NWO. Yeah. So that was like a side kind of fun thing because those guys are old friends. So all of that was so cool. And sadly, of course, both gentlemen died way too early, sadly. So, but any more history, or should we get into the match?
Well, let's not forget also that Curt Hennig and the West Texas Rednecks in WCW also have a number 1 chart-topping hit with "Rap Is Crap."
That's
if you remember that back in the day, it was a big hit. Actually made it on the country music charts. So stupid and so funny, but that's something else. Curt Hennig was a giant fan of country music.
Yeah. Loved
his country music, and he was also really good friends with MLB Hall of Famer Wade Boggs. Did you know that?
No, I did not know that.
And he actually, now that I'm on this train, I might as well finish the story.
Please.
He actually saved Wade Boggs' life one time. They became friends. They went out hunting one day, and Wade got caught in a barbed wire fence and had cut his leg really badly. Like, he was probably, if no one had found him, he was going to bleed out. But Curt Hennig got him free and carried him like a mile and a half on his back to to where they could get to a hospital. Saved his life.
Huh.
And Wade Boggs was like, I'll never forget him for that, and just crazy stuff like that.
He pulled a true grit. He carried him all the way overnight to the hospital to save his life.
He did. Tough as nails, man. Mr. Perfect. Don't play no games.
Don't let that blonde bleach hair fool you, man. That guy was tough as nails and fought so all the time. So, yeah, it's Wade Boggs, wouldn't you know it? That just makes so much sense. I wonder how he'd feel now with that hit song with Lil Nas X and Billy Ray Cyrus from last year.
Old Town Road?
About that. Old Town Road, if you'd be upset about that one.
He'd probably like it. He'd probably like that song.
He might like that song. That's right.
He'd probably be in that song.
Anything more for Bockwinkel? Anything more for Henning? Are we good, or you want to jump into the match?
We'll talk more about Bockwinkel at the end of the match, because there's a note that I want to make sure that we get to at the end of it.
Sounds good. One last thing I want to bring up here is Larry Szybysko. What is his part in this match? Because he does obviously affect the match. And once again, we are going to spoil this match. You haven't watched this match, pause it right here. Thank you for downloading, or thank you for listening to this. Go watch the match and then come back and pick up right where you left off here, because we're going to spoil the match and what happens. But right from this point forward, there will be spoilers. What was Zbyszko's role coming into this match? What was this issue? Because he tried to shake both men's hands a la Apollo Creed and Rocky III, but both men's hands wiped or didn't shake his hand at the beginning of the match.
Larry Szybysko at this time was just playing the entitled prick, even more so than Larry Szybysko, or not Larry Szybysko, even more so than Nick Bockwinkle was. Larry had his rivalries with Ric Flair in the AWA and other guys. So Larry was kind of on the way up at this point. I know that some people have some strong feelings about whether they like Larry Szybysko or not. I can take him or leave him. It doesn't really bother me either way. I think that he's looked the same age for about 50 years.
It's mind-blowing.
Isn't it? Same hair.
You tell me black don't crack. This white man looks the same for 50 years. I don't know what he's drinking or what he's doing, but he has looked the same. Even in this clip, yes, he's thinner, but the face looks the same, for God's sakes. There's no wrinkles. Even going forward, I remember him in the 90s and the 2000s, and I hated him because he had that rivalry with Sammartino, and I was a massive Bruno Sammartino fan, and seeing what Larry did to him, I thought, and that was back when I thought wrestling was real, and I thought he was like just so treating him like dog crap and making fun of him and insulting a legend, and it drove me insane. And then when you read about the stuff that Zbyszko pulled behind the scenes, you're like, oh, this is just an extension of who this guy really actually is. So no surprise that he plays a part in this in a heel way.
But he does ask for a AWA World Heavyweight Championship. Well, actually, he demanded a shot at the winner, and it's agreed upon just right then and there. And Larry sits ringside for this match, so he's going to play an integral role later, unfortunately. But in a tux. But the first thing that you'll notice about this match, if you kind of rewind it back, there's no entrance music.
Mm-hmm.
There are no mats on the outside. It's all concrete.
Yeah.
It has this. It's funny because on Superclash, I believe this was the third match. It wasn't even the main event, which is kind of funny. But
right.
It felt like a big fight feel, like the way the announcers announce both guys and just the way that they do it a little bit differently than they do in the WWF nowadays and stuff like that. Then you have the referee actually explaining the rules, which is kind of nice. So you actually know what the hell is going on. One thing that I didn't realize, I didn't get a chance to look it up, was at one point in this match, I believe Curt Hennig has the figure 4 on Bockwinkel, and Bockwinkel grabs the rope with one arm, and the ref starts kicking his arm off.
Yeah.
So I wondered if you had to have both arms on the ropes. I wasn't sure if that was the rule or not. I meant to look it up, and I'm sorry I didn't. Yeah. But if he grabbed it with 2, he was fine. But if he grabbed it with 1, it wasn't enough or something like that.
Maybe that was kind of you were getting leverage or something like that, so they kicked it off the rope. Yeah.
Maybe, and maybe that was it. But it was just kind of weird to see that. But I mean, like you said, this is a technical match. There's no people diving off the top rope in this one. There's no tables. There's no chairs. None of that kind of garbage.
Right.
It's just these two dudes chain wrestling each other. Yeah. And that sounds probably super boring to somebody that's used to watching AEW or 205 Live or NXT or something like that. But this is where wrestling was in its heyday. This is where it started. We didn't have all this stuff going on. We got headlock takeover after headlock takeover into a head scissor back up. Yeah. Same thing, back up, shoulder tackle, clotheslines. But everything they did made sense. It looked like it hurt.
Yeah. When
they're throwing punches, they're not just no-selling it. They're going down. They're making some loud smacks. I'm sure some of them were stiff.
Yeah.
It looked good. I thought it was a good match. I mean, it's not the best match I've ever seen. It's a little slow-paced, which is, it's for back then, it's par for the course. I'm really interested to hear what you think about the match, because while I don't think you expected that ending, and I don't think you would expect Curt Hennig to win with a punch, because that's what happened. But he did get to use the axe, his father's finisher, which was pretty awesome. Yeah. But what did you think of it overall? A little slow paced, or were you okay with it?
No, overall, I absolutely enjoyed it. See, the thing is this: you just don't know when you're watching a technical match if you're going to be that interested in watching it. It's because it can be technically correct, and I liken this to any performer at all, and no matter what field they're in. You can watch a technically good actor and not feel anything. You can listen to a technically well-performed song and not feel or connect to it at all, and you can recognize that is really well done, doesn't do a damn thing for me. And you can watch technical wrestling matches and feel the same way. I can tell both of these guys or both of these ladies know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly the moves, and they got the chemistry, whatever, but it's doing nothing for me. In this situation, that is absolutely the opposite. These two guys are so interesting for the shots that they're taking, for the style and the pace of the match, and for how they flow with each other, and the unusual moments that occur, the usual moments of brutality that occur amidst the technical wrestling, which I enjoyed. Bockwinkel kicking on Curt Hennig after he's trying to get up, after he hits the guardrail. Curt Hennig with those hardcore, stiff elbow shots to the actual face, and you would hardly see any slaps to sell the thing. It is legitimate shots that they're doing at each other, back and forth. The switches work, all of that. You know what struck me as I was watching this, Aaron, actually was how did these guys and guys speak in the ring when they're doing moves or whatever, how did these guys do that? Because I couldn't catch any real moments where they're like whispering in each other's ear or holding each other extended wise. I was very surprised at how much faith they had in each other to make the switches when they made the switches. And those buckles were not the buckles you see nowadays. That wrestling that wrestling ring looked like just plywood with some springs underneath it. So these guys were taking legitimate shots both inside and outside the ring, not only from each other, but from the actual wrestling ring and the outside area with the concrete and the guard railing. So all around, I thought this match had great pace. I thought this match was so, I don't know what can I say. It's like as a wrestling nerd, it was a joy to watch these two guys go at it and neither one give in to the other until the absolute end of that match. It could have gone a full 60 minutes, these guys, just like that other match we were referencing earlier. And I wouldn't have been upset about it at all because I just had nothing but mad respect for both of these guys' skills and the way they were telling the story in the ring with each other. I thought that was great as well.
Well, here's the thing, and you mentioned it, like, I don't know if they had the mics on the ring, but it seemed like you could hear everything. Man.
Oh, yeah.
You could hear every punch, every slam, you could hear it. And when Bockwinkel threw Hennig into that turnbuckle and the commentator said, I think the ring moved 2 inches, I think it did too. Because he hit hard when he got thrown into that. But what got me was when Hennig went for to jump at Bockwinkel through the turnbuckle and went to the outside. Oh. I was like, oh my goodness. Like, I didn't even see that coming. And for a match like that, or a move like that, to just compel me, like, it grabbed my attention right off the bat. And, of course, they worked a body part. Bockwinkel worked on that shoulder.
Yep.
And then Hennig came back and worked on Bockwinkel's leg. Yep. It's just technical wrestling 101. It was friggin' awesome to watch. I love that kind of stuff. Yep. You know, Hennig gets him in the figure 4 leg lock. We talked about the rope break just a minute ago. It's a really cool sequence of events. But what ends up happening is they both punch each other in the face. Hennig falls into the ropes. Bockwinkel's down. And while the ref isn't looking, Larry Szybysko slides Curt Hennig a roll of quarters. And bam, he pops Nick Bockwinkle with it. And with a punch, Curt Hennig gets the 1-2-3 and becomes AWA World Heavyweight Champion, finally defeating Nick Bockwinkle, albeit a little bit of controversy.
Yeah.
And that's what happened in the aftermath as the NWA, excuse me, I'm sorry, folks. The AWA World Heavyweight Championship was held in escrow. What?
Right.
Was held, like it's a bank account, was held in escrow until, you know, they could make a decision as if they were going to let that stand or not. But they ended up letting it stand. Curt Hennig was held up, and he was the AWA World Heavyweight Champion. Thoughts on the finish?
It was unusual because it felt like it came out of nowhere because it wasn't like Zbyszko was interfering throughout the match. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You didn't sense that, like, nowadays you'd have that person like do little things outside the ring that betrayed their interest in having one person win over the other. Little things would be done here, but none of that. You see Zbyszko being like security guards telling him to walk onto the other side of the ring, him moving around to seat, just kind of looking at everything, and then at that exact moment going in there sliding in those coins and Henning picking it up. Because, I mean, I was surprised because, once again, neither of these guys shook this dude's hand. So I was surprised that they won that this is how it ended. And it seemed to end almost kind of out of the blue, you know, not in a clumsy way, but just boom, that's it. Like, I was enjoying this match, and I was in that space after the 30-minute mark where I was like, okay, let's see how long this thing is going. I'm having a good time. And then all of a sudden, bam, it's over a few minutes later with that shot by Henning with the coins. And then you see the coins drop on the ground, and you actually see the paper. Let me tell you something. A roll of coins is tough to undo. So whatever.
He got him.
Yeah, he certainly got him because to rip the paper off like that is not easy. And to see it all down there and everyone like having questions about it and all the mayhem in the ring, you know, it was such an unusual situation for that. And of course, that's a heel move, though, isn't it? That's the heel move. You use the foreign object, you get the victory, and then the belt is contested, but you're still awarded the belt at the end of the investigation, and you go and defend it. So yes, the ending was a bit weird because it seemed to come out of the blue, but then again, storyline wise, it absolutely worked. As you said, Aaron, Zbyszko got himself a match for the title. So he was looking to see who he was going to face, and maybe he felt facing Curt Hennig in the storyline was an easier win for him, or easier possibility to win over Nick Bockwinkle, the veteran.
Well, snooze, you lose on that one, Zbyszko, because he actually didn't get the title shot. It ended up going to Jerry the King Lawler, who took away the AWA Championship from Curt Hennig in a great match. And then Jerry Lawler, of course, the King, as we know him today, the commentator, would go on to beat Kerry Von Erich for the WCCW Championship, and he would be a unified champion. Wow. So Jerry Lawler, I mean, the King, man. You can't beat the King. Love the King. Yeah. But, as it goes in the aftermath of this, Nick Bockwinkle would retire at the end of this year. He would eventually be an on-air commissioner in the 90s for WCW. That's when I first saw him. Yeah. When he was with WCW in the 90s. He didn't get a chance to reunite with Bobby Heenan, which would have been freaking awesome back in the day. Never got a chance to do that. He also was a road agent for WWE for a long time before his passing. He was a member of he was actually the leader of the Cauliflower Alley Club, which is an organization that helps wrestlers and their families. He was the president until 2014, which due to health problems, he had to step away as he would pass away a year later. Yep. And of course, Curt Hennig, as we know, he would leave the AWA a year later for the WWF. He would change his name to Mr. Perfect, of course, and become one of the most decorated Intercontinental Champions of all time. Yeah. And as we talked about earlier, you made the distinction. These two have very parallel lives and very parallel careers. Yeah. Mr. Perfect, Curt Hennig, and Nick Bockwinkle were both inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame at the same time in 2007. And unfortunately, we lost Curt Hennig in 2003 and Nick Bockwinkle in 2015. Didn't Bobby Heenan induct Bockwinkle? I don't know if I remember that correctly. I forget who inducted Nick Bockwinkle. I thought it was Heenan. Maybe sure. I'm not. Maybe not. Sure. Or maybe he inducted Henning. I don't know. Or maybe he inducted them both. I don't remember at the time, but I know that is true. They both went in at the same time. Great point, Aaron. Which is pretty awesome. I mean, these two had, parallel careers, a great rivalry in the AWA, and really were the stalwarts of that organization. Yeah, you've got Vern Gagne, Greg Gagne, Hulk Hogan for a little bit of time, the Midnight Rockers, Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty, Baron Von Raschke, and these other folks that really made the AWA something. But it really was the rivalry between Bockwinkel and Hennig that put it on the map as an athletic competition to see. And if you go back and watch those ESPN classic shows, you'll see that Bockwinkel and Stevens and these guys and Hennig and Scott Hall, they're all integral parts of these storylines at all times because they were the MVPs more or less of that organization. Right, and when you watch this match, you'll see in the audience, it's not a sold-out arena. The Cow Palace there in San Francisco, it's not sold out. Like you said, there's no entrance music, there's no Titantron or any of that kind of stuff. This is people coming to enjoy grappling, actual grappling in the ring. And that's what you get out of this entire match. And Nick Bockwinkle certainly doing his thing. And so these guys' dedication to the craft, to the sweet science, it is about their love of it, right? And they're training since teenagers to be a part of it, and seeing them hit the highest of peaks in terms of their abilities in this match was fun to see. Bockwinkle, of course, maybe one last ride as a veteran, putting the young man over with that rivalry was fantastic. And you mentioned the thing about Bockwinkle, and Hogan. Hogan came after he was fired by the WWE, and a lot of people don't know that, or the World Wrestling Federation, it was called back in '81. He went to the AWA, had a thing with Bockwinkel, and then there was a lot of politics involved about the belts and all this kind of stuff, and Bockwinkel wanting to retain it or not retain it, and everybody else involved in it, that he jetted out of the AWA like in '83, I think, or late '82, and then ended up back in the WWF, and that's what launched Hulkamania. So if Bockwinkel maybe doesn't pull politics, or we don't have politics going on at the time, maybe we don't have Hulkamania, and maybe you and Aaron, you and I, we're not even doing this show. There's certainly little things that could have happened that if you don't have the right person in at the right time, things don't explode. And certainly Hulk Hogan is an essential part of professional wrestling, a pillar of professional wrestling as successful as it is today is because of what Hogan did in the 80s, and Bockwinkel indirectly making that happen. And of course, Henning benefiting from that later on when he goes to the WWF. From what I understand, I think it was more Vern Gagne than it was Nick Bockwinkle pulling politics. Okay, it's cool. It's cool. I think what it was, if I recall, Hogan said that Hogan had made his own T-shirt, like Hulkamania or Hulk Rules or whatever. He made his own T-shirt and was selling it himself. Well, when he was working for AWA. So Hulk goes on a Japan tour, comes back and finds out that Vern has been selling these Hulk Hogan T-shirts, but doesn't want to cut Hogan in on the revenue.
Wow.
So Hulk's like, dude, what's the deal?
Yeah.
And then they weren't going to give Hulk the title for some reason. I don't remember what that was, because he wasn't going to commit long term to the AWA. Yeah. So he goes back to WWF. 83, 84 Hulkamania hits, and it's off to the races from there. So if things were different, and you get them revenues, brother, get them royalties, brother, we may not be having the red and yellow all over the place and running wild. You're right. Yeah. It's very different.
Well, something, if you pay me my money, brother, I wouldn't have left. But they didn't do it, Mean Gene.
Mean Gene, also an AWA stalwart before he went to. There's a lot of people that were in the AWA that crossed over to WWF that Vince McMahon stole. So I mean, Eric Bischoff, a young Eric Bischoff, worked for the AWA as well.
Oh, really?
So, yes, as a commentator, absolutely.
I thought he was selling meat out of the back of his van. What does he say there?
Something like that.
Something like that.
Selling Blue Chew these days, but
bumming gas to get to high school. Yeah, those things that Hogan said. But yeah, I mean, this was so much. I appreciated you suggesting this one, Aaron, because I had a really good time watching this one. I really had a great time revisiting some of the early work, of some of the best early work of Curt Hennig, and certainly some of the best work of Nick Bockwinkle, a veteran, as you said. And yeah, a sad ending for Nick. He had dementia, which apparently Ric Flair revealed in a podcast, I think on Stone Cold's podcast, much to the chagrin of Bockwinkle's wife, who denied it because Bockwinkel didn't want it to be public, but by the end, she didn't want it to be public, rather, but by the end, and this is his second wife, who he stayed with for the rest of his life after he married her, she, at the end, she did admit when he passed away that it had been dementia and mental illness. And you mentioned he was the president of the Cauliflower Club. Our own friend Ken Knapsack goes to that every year in Vegas. B. Brian Blair, Mr. The Bees, Killer Bees, he took over after Bockwinkel left, and of course Bockwinkel probably would have stayed as long as possible, because certainly he was known for having long runs and long stretches of time working for federations when he got the opportunity to be a part of them. So it was great to see. And bro, I mean, it's just heartbreaking, because you think about Henning and all that could have been possible, man. He could have been a great manager, could have been a great backstage guy, could have been great, creator of storylines in the ear of Vince McMahon. There's so many great things that Henning could have done if he had not left too early. What was it, a heart attack, or was it an overdose? What was it with him?
Acute cocaine intoxication. Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, such a shame there. Don't do drugs, kids. Don't do drugs. But those kinds of things that sadly lead to the end of wrestlers. And maybe it was the pain from matches like this that caused him to turn to that kind of stuff to kind of ease the pain of it all. Who knows? But it's a shame that we lost him, because I think there was a bright future for Curt Hennig outside of the ring once he hung up those boots. That we could have really enjoyed as fans of his for decades.
One more little anecdote about Curt Hennig before we go and talk about next week's show. You want to know why Curt Hennig is a tough SOB? He offered to wrestle Brock Lesnar in a shoot on an airplane. Like a legit, young Brock, like a 22, 23-year-old Brock Lesnar against like a 40-year-old Curt Hennig on an airplane. You should look up that story if you haven't heard about it. It's pretty incredible. He and Brock wrestled on an airplane, which sounds horrifying to have those two big behemoths going at each other in the air. But
where do you wrestle on the airplane? Where? These guys weren't flying first class. Where are you wrestling in the aisles?
I don't know, but allegedly one of them got slammed into the emergency exit door and really scared the hell out of everybody. So,
I'm sure. Holy crap.
Yeah, don't mess with Curt Hennig. He will take you down. It doesn't matter who you are. You're Brock Lesnar. It doesn't matter who you are. He'll take you down.
Lesnar has the weirdest real life feuds. Lesnar has the weirdest real life fights when you look at it. Goldberg too. He has his share. Crazy stuff. I know you don't like him, but I'm just saying.
Really don't. Chris Jericho whooped his ass, and I couldn't be happier that he did that.
That's right. I remember that. That's right. Anyway, that's it. That's this episode of Strong Style. Aaron, what do we got going on for next week, my man?
All right, so next week we are talking about, because it'll be the birthday around that time. March 1st is the birthday of someone that I've actually got the opportunity to do some work for, and I'm a big fan of. John, I know you are as well.
Yes.
Not the 1, not the 2, not the 3, not the 4, but the 5-time WCW champion, Booker T. It's his birthday, and we're going to be talking about his first ever WCW title win, Bash at the Beach 2000, against that SOB Jeff Jarrett. So next week on Strong Style, we'll be talking about Booker T, sucker, if you can dig that.
Can you dig it? Yeah, big fan of Booker T. It was so much fun to do a schmodown in a wrestling ring at Booker T's reality wrestling place there in Houston. My honor to be in that ring. My honor to meet that man. My honor to work a scene with that man. I never thought in my life that the words, the Outlaw John Rocha, would come out of Booker T's mouth in my lifetime. Having it happen after I won the belt when I beat Dan Murrell meant the world to me. And then having to, a couple of years later, be in the ring with him and work a program, do a scene with him outside the ring, heading into what happened there that night was a true joy and honor. So it's going to be so much fun to talk about this, because this was a seminal moment in WCW history, and seminal moment for black wrestlers, seminal moment for Booker T, absolutely, and what happened when this occurred, because Booker had been building up to this moment himself, a la Edge, and in the WWE, he had been building up steadily to get to this position and to finally have him win that belt against one of the wrestlers I hate the most, Jeff Jarrett, was such a great thing. So we're going to talk about all of that. I don't want to spoil too much. We're going to talk about all of it next week, but I can't thank you all enough for taking the time to download this episode or to listen to this episode as we talk about this great match between Nick Bockwinkle, the AWA champion at the time, and Curt Hennig. Fantastic Superclash II from 1987 in the Cow Palace in San Francisco. So much fun to revisit this match with you all, so we can't thank you enough. Please leave a comment in the comments section below. Remember to subscribe to this YouTube channel as well, and share this episode with your wrestling friends on your social media. All that you can do there, we would really appreciate. Aaron, where can they find you, brother?
You can find me on Twitter at OnlyAaronTurner, and I have started a YouTube for my resale business. I do it on the side. I resell stuff on eBay and Amazon, so you can check that out. If that's something you're interested in, you can find that at Titan Collectibles on YouTube. Dig it, freak out.
Nice. I like that. You can follow me at The Rocha Says on Twitter and on Instagram. And like I said, please subscribe to that channel below. Please give this thing some likes as well. It's always good to get likes, get as many views as possible. And we'll talk to you next week with a brand new episode of Strong Style.